Hey, welcome back, everyone, to the Crazy Shifts Show, as I like to call it. We're live today. We're on LinkedIn, and if all goes well, if all the communications are going well, we should be live on YouTube and also Facebook. So I've got an old friend of mine here. Not old, not as an age old. But
thanks, I appreciate that. I am getting older, though, so I think we all are.
Yeah, a career old friend. We were doing business together. Is it 20 years? Maybe
it's probably close to 20 years ago. I've been out of that business almost 15 now, so it's pretty amazing how time flies.
Yeah, and our things obviously evolve and change. And Bill had contacted me just a few weeks ago, Bill Keller, for a few weeks ago about a new venture that he was in, and really excited to talk about it. So we chatted, and I said, one way that I've gotten to share a lot of the conversations that I've been in is to schedule them on live events and kind of go through there, because I know what I've got to, some of the questions I have, so do a lot of the people that I meet with on a daily basis. So Bill, why don't you just give a little background of kind of where, how you got into this business, which is staffing, from log cabins.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, and it has been quite a journey. So as Ira was saying, I was in the log home business. So we built log homes and log cabins for campgrounds and resorts all over the world, and had a 100,000 square foot manufacturing facility, 50 employees, and 25 subcontractors. So all the problems that Ira deals with in the HR side, we had them all, and he helped us to avoid a lot of them as well through his testing and his just assessment services. So I can't speak highly, say enough about him and his services, because I know he saved us a whole bunch of time and money. But all that to say is, I was in that business, and obviously with all of that going on, it was very hard to kind of get away. And I love to travel. So I got out of that business. I sold the business, and if I could get away for a week or two a year, I was doing pretty well. And so after that, I moved into the printing world. I had a printing company as part of my my marketing arm for my log home company. You may or may not have known that. And then I went to work for another printing company, and quickly found out what I didn't know, and also what they didn't know about the printing world. And it was a very tumultuous time. Basically, it was during the downturn, 2007, 2008. And basically, they wanted me to turn the business around, but they didn't want to make any changes. That was going to be a little hard. So we parted ways. But during that time, I read a couple books that were very influential. I'm a reader, and always have been. But there were some that really shook my world. And one of those was The World is Flat by a guy named Thomas Friedman.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, and
one of my and his follow-up books.
And so I read that book, and when he was talking about people from India tutoring kids in Chicago, I was like, wow, what if you could do that? What else could you do? It was just a kind of a wake-up call for me. And then I read another book called The 4-Hour Workweek. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, by a guy named Tim Ferriss. And some people love it, some people hate it, but I've done pretty much everything in that book, and I can say it works. And so basically, I started after reading that, I said, I'm going to do something different. So I wanted to start a new company. So I started a marketing company, and basically I had three things that I had to have as part of this company. One is it had to be scalable. It had to be able to be done anywhere in the world, because I wanted to travel, and it had to be able to start with a fairly small amount of money. And so I did that, started the marketing company, and I started using some of the tools and principles that they talked about in those books, which is using remote staff. Some of those were in the United States. Some of them were all over the world. And so through that process of using them for my marketing company, I've spent up to 3 months in Costa Rica running my business from there. And people are going, how are you doing that? Like I can't get away for a week or two. And it's not like I'm not working. So I'm working from down there, but I had this freedom of mobility. And basically I've used other people's infrastructure. And so I don't have to go out and buy assets, just like a lot of people today don't go buy a phone system. They rent one basically by using other people's hardware, just like Amazon cloud services or web services. And I did the same thing. And then I started to do that with people as well. And because of my experience in the manufacturing world and have hiring and firing literally hundreds of people over the years, I wanted to do something different. And so I basically started using these remote staffs. In the beginning, it was just for tasks. Okay, I need this specific task done, or maybe it's project oriented, and then it was done. And then I started moving up to hiring for roles. And then at that point, they became the backbone of my business. And they were talking to clients, they were talking to my customers, they were making deals, they were doing things better than I could do. I have people that are used to negotiating. In our culture, we just don't negotiate that very much.
Right.
And so, I'm having them walk away for negotiating with me with much better deal than I could have gotten myself. So all that to say is I formed a partnership with a gentleman in India because I was expanding my marketing company. And then when people started asking me, how are you doing this? I started moving into the staffing side. And basically what we've done, and if your audience isn't familiar with this, anybody can hire staff overseas. There's plenty of websites all around, freelancer.com, Upwork, used to be Elance, and Fiverr is another one. And so I try not to hide this, even though I'm in the staffing world. Like, it's out there, it's not, I'm not going to say it's not out there. It is. What we tried to do is something a little bit different, because if you're into that world and you can go do it, great. But even for the people that are, we tried to bring something a little bit different to the marketplace. And that is, we have our own office, because not everybody's made to work at home. Okay. And so we hire people that are employees. They actually work for us. We have an office manager. We have an actual office. We have infrastructure over there. We actually use a co-working space in Mumbai. And so it gives them a nice facilities. They actually stay after most of the time because they like our office better than their houses or their homes.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's a great place to hang out, and we have a great community as well. And I've spent a lot of time trying to build the culture and build community, even though a lot of the people are not working specifically for my process of marketing, my marketing company, because I still have my marketing company, but they're working for other people. And we want to just kind of create that community and that culture, and then also try to integrate them into the culture of the company that they're working for as well. So that kind of brings us full circle. That's kind of how I got here. And did that answer your question?
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a great setup. And by the way, I just want to let everybody, and anybody who's watching, since we're live, I keep looking down and I'm moving around. I'm not ignoring you. I'm not checking other messages and things. We are live on LinkedIn. And I just wanted to be set up and make sure that if there's any comments or anybody has any questions, that I can follow those too. So the current platform I'm using on our big screen here doesn't allow us to do that. So I just want to make sure that, again, if there's any questions or any participation, that I can catch those as we're going on. So, Bill, as a small business owner, done a lot of hiring and firing, and not too much firing, fortunately, over the years, but certainly get questions from a lot of my clients. But for a lot of the business people that are online, yes, you can go up to Upwork. Again, most of those are going to be tech people, graphic artists, so there's a lot of other positions. I'm not sure, you can hire finance. There's almost every position you can hire, I guess, except for some healthcare workers that still need to be a little bit more hands-on.
I just had a client the other day. I just had a client the other day said, if you could get a CNA in our location, and he said, it would be a gold mine, but I can't do that. But
soon, they'll have virtual. We got remote monitoring.
Yeah.
So, all those services will be there. But for right now, the hands-on, hey, I need to help somebody get up or feed them or do whatever. Right now, that's human beings live, touch, human to human. But what are some of the, I know one of the concerns is, or that I can imagine, and because I've had it, I have hired graphic artists. I've hired people to do web design. I've hired people to do a lot of tech setups and things. But I know, you and I had talked about even using, having an accountant or a bookkeeper. And I'm sure that there's some concerns over that as far as privacy, confidentiality, protection. Although
Those are great
a lot of
questions.
a lot of the accountants, and this was in the World is Flat book too. Accounting was predicted 10 years ago that India would be doing a lot of the bookkeeping that accountants do today. And I remember talking to the accountants and go, well, that'll never happen. Our clients would never trust that service. Well, now roll the clock 10 years ago, and a lot of those a lot of those same firms are doing that. So even though you may not hire them, your accountant may not be actually doing that work anyway. So what are some of the more unusual, I guess the more unusual jobs? We're not up to CNAs yet, and
Sure.
beyond the graphic artist, what are some of the other positions that you've worked with clients?
So this is a great one. Since I have a marketing company, I have a laser engraver. And so I actually have one of my designers over there program the laser engraver. So he does the designs in India. He takes over our computer here and then programs the laser from 10,000 miles away. And then all we have to do is put in the parts and press go.
That's amazing.
That's
crazy.
Basically, you can think of this as what to get the most amount of value out of this, you need to start looking at the jobs in components and basically breaking it apart and saying, "It's okay, well, I can't bring a CNA over, for example. Well, what do they do? Do they write reports? Now, I understand in that community, they need a certain number of hours, like actual per person there in the facility. But for the most part, let's say they needed to write a report. You could put, let's say, a body camera and a microphone on somebody, and they could go as, hey, we need a report, and this person did this, this, and this, and the report's written up by somebody overseas, and they just go at the end of the shift and they approve it. And that would be one way to take a load off of that individual person to give you more capacity. I use a methodology that there was a book out many years ago called The Goal. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It was a manufacturing book. It was about what was called the theory of constraints. And so in today's world, I don't know if you're running into this, people are having a hard time finding the help they need.
Oh, every day.
Yeah, every day, right? So in some ways, that is their constraint. That's their bottleneck. That determines their ability to get throughput through their business, right? And so we need to find ways to increase that constraint and to widen that bottleneck. And so even though a lot of times people are going, well, I can do it quicker. Yes, you might be more efficient, but your quote unquote efficiency is slowing down the entire system. Okay. And that's what we tried to come in and say is, oh, how are we going to widen that bottleneck for you? I think that the guys that we have in India are just as good as anybody you can find in the US. Now, sometimes it takes them a while to get up to speed, but that's just par for the course for anybody. But the whole point is, what is your expectation going into this, and how do we find the positions to kind of widen that bottleneck for you, take some load off of somebody so they have more capacity in the things that we can't do for them. And that's the thing as far as like the CNA is concerned, the programmers. So if you had a machine shop and you needed CNC programming, they could do a lot of that while your machine operates.
A lot of people are struggling to find CNC workers for sure.
Right. So there's a lot of those components or elements of that job that could be done overseas. And the neat thing is people think it's kind of a zero-sum game. Like, oh, I'm taking jobs from here and moving them over there. And that's just not the truth, because basically we can't fill the jobs we have. And so if we can get more capacity out the door, it's going to be, we find it's better for everybody in the process. One, the companies make more money. Two, the employees get to generally do higher level work. So
Mm-hmm.
they're eventually going to be able to make more money or ask for more money. My employees in India love it because they love working for American companies. We pay them above average wages and they love our culture. And so it's a win-win for them. And generally the customers of the company are able to get their product or their service out quicker and better than they could before, especially with a dearth of workers. So it's a win-win for everybody.
So for someone that's used to having that body, literally, it's a warm body in place. Doesn't mean that they're the best, but they're a warm body. What are the things that what are the steps that I would need to go through, or someone like me, to hire that remote worker? What's your prep work? What's the process? What do I need to kind of consider?
So a couple things. There's a process that we work through. So I'm going to kind of bifurcate this into what you might need if you were going to do it on your own,
Mm-hmm.
or what you're going to need to do it. But I think some of the things are very similar. We kind of help kind of bridge the gap and sometimes if you're not used to doing this. But one, clear expectations. If you can't define what this person, and this should be for any job,
I was
but
going to say that's a hard thing for even when they're hiring the warm body locally. I have to go through and there's really vague descriptions of what they're looking for. So.
Yeah, and so the problem comes in is they think when they're hiring somebody overseas, or like they should know how to do this for some reason. And I'm going, as why would they know if you don't know for your employees who are sitting right there in your plant? We have to be even more clear. And so I think getting very, very clear, which I think is good for any position, overseas or otherwise, really kind of looking and saying, at least initially, do I have a repeated task that can be done over and over again, even if there's slight modifications to it, but something that's going, I use the 80-20 principle. What as 20% of the effort, that we're going to get 80% of the results. If you say every case is different in your business, this might not be the best thing, because basically what you're saying is I have a process. It's just so undefined and so erratic that it's hard to quantify. And so what you're asking somebody to do by being there physically, you're asking them to be basically a machine learning, like a computer. You're just going to see everything and you're going to like make your own algorithm. It's hard to do that when you're remote. So we need to be very, very clear. So that's the first thing. And then I think determine what type of qualifications you're looking for. Obviously, what's really important to you. Is it budget? Or are you willing to pay a little bit more? Oftentimes there's very little difference we find between people that have, 10 years experience and people that have 1 or 2 years experience. If you're willing to pay a few more dollars an hour, you can get somebody that's much more qualified. What I'll also say is, oftentimes over here, we would say, hey, I'm not going to hire that person because they're overqualified. That's another thing that I would kind of step back and relook at, because they're often willing to do work that we would think they're overqualified for, and they're happy to do it. And you're getting somebody then who might go into that position. We might have somebody that might be actually not that much less than somebody over here, but over here we would hire somebody who was just out of high school, and over there they've got an advanced degree. And the type of things that they pick up on is it just takes your business to another level. And so I think being very, very clear, determining how long the job is going to last. Are you going to hire them just for a task or for a project, or are you actually hiring them for a role? Then the other thing, obviously budget is important. Communication is really important as well, especially when you're dealing with somebody overseas. A lot of times people say, well, if they can't speak perfect English, I don't want them. And I go, they're an accountant. They don't talk to anybody. And why would you say that? And I'm saying is, you're just basically cutting out a huge percentage of the population and I think a lot of very qualified people, if they have to have perfect English. It doesn't mean that they can't communicate well. It doesn't mean that you won't be able to understand them, but there could be some things that are a little bit different or a little bit off, but you can still get somebody who can communicate very effectively. And oftentimes their written communication is better than their spoken communication, and they understand everything. It's just sometimes the word order is a little bit different, or they might use some different words than we did before. So understanding what your level of communication is actually needed, and then understanding, we really like to test. So oftentimes before we bring on a hire, we'll actually set up a testing protocol.
Right.
And so whether you're doing this on Upwork or Fiverr, I will often, if you have a larger project, I will put out the larger project, and then we will actually get all the resumes in. We'll come up with the top 3, and then I'll put out a testing protocol to test the top 3. And I might not even, it might be a project that I've done internally before, and I just want to see how well they are able to handle that.
Right.
And then also understand it's like a training or learning period for yourself to understand how well your instructions work. Like,
right.
Oftentimes people send off the test and they go, oh, they didn't do it right. And then I look at it and go, do you know they gave you what you asked for, but it wasn't what you wanted?
Right. Right.
So
right answer, wrong question. Right.
Right. So those are a couple of the top 10, top couple tips that I would say.
Yeah.
That's going to get you over 80% of the way there.
No.
We typically don't hire for tasks and projects, because what we found is, unless there's something that's really, really defined, it doesn't work very well.
Right.
It's just because there's so much there's so much that's hard to relay to them, and you don't even know that you know it.
Right. So, I mean, but just going back just a few minutes of where you started, was what you're recommending is what basically everybody recommends anyway, is that there should be, a defined description, and the description is not the standard job description that just lists lots of responsibilities, but there's not necessarily a path to get there. And so people hire for, certain tasks. So I think we did this with your organization way back when we first met, and figuring out what type of testing, what was the best type of person was, what do you want to accomplish at the, I always say at the end of a year, how will you measure that person's success? What will they have to accomplish at the end of that 6 months, 12 months, whatever it might be? And then what do they need to do on an everyday basis to get there? And basically that's looking at the role that they're going to play. And it may break it down into some specific tasks, but you're not hiring just for that task, because just somebody knows how to do that task doesn't mean that they can do the job. Because they can, just as you said with the question, they can answer the question well, but that's not what you were looking for, because you want more than that. So I always start out with what ultimately, regardless if it's hiring remote, whether it's hiring U.S., global, or on site, how are you going to measure that person's success at the end of the year, and what do they have to do to get there? And that's an interesting exercise, because a lot of people say, well, we've got to talk to Joe. He's been doing the job for 30 years. Well, then Joe, how are you going to, you can't measure him against Joe. And that's what happens. They measure the success and the output and the productivity against somebody who's either been doing the job well, or oftentimes that they've been doing the job really poorly, and they say, we want it better. But, better than someone who's doing it poorly is not a good job description.
Yes, that is, I would agree with you.
Yeah. So, hey, I know we try to keep these to like 30 minutes or so, and these conversations always go really, really fast. Obviously people can get in contact with you, and you have a conversation with them of what's involved, helping go through those expectations. What else should someone know, whether hiring globally or hiring remote first, and then whether that's global or not? What should they know again, before even picking up the phone and calling you?
Well, I think obviously they need to be open to at least having the conversation, because if they say, hey, they have to be here, or they have these expectations, things that are like, and I go, well, why? Unless they're willing to question expectations, it's probably not worth the conversation. I don't want to like cut people off, but I'm saying is in today's world, people go, that can't be done. I said, it can't be done or you can't do it. They're two different things. It's okay either way, but just make sure if you're open to, you want to hear what's open, I'm willing to have the conversation. Some things that we try to do to make it safer for you, because one, we have like third parties. That's the other thing that I would tell you. As you start to work with people, having a third party in that culture to help mediate any issues or problems is a really big plus.
I think that's huge. I mean, again, just hiring remote, and I know other companies do, is that they have a contact over there. The fact that you have a physical place that people come to work and somebody overseeing that, I think that's, I mean, it's a great hybrid. And I know you mentioned that word all over the place
Yeah.
in your brochures and on your website about having the hybrid, but I think that's outstanding. I mean, you're basically have an open workspace. And again, but they're your employees, and there's somebody is supervising. You just can't see them on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And the other thing is we're also trying to make sure that they've got the wherewithal to have the infrastructure that you're needing for them to do your process. So if they ever
what's the
have
minimum that they need? If I was going to hire somebody remote, and maybe, and I would probably be hiring more administrative or technical people.
Yeah.
What are my minimum requirements that I would need to be able to provide?
As a business owner, I mean, typically we can provide our phone system, or you can provide your own phone system. That's obviously critical. I say in the beginning, obviously having that connection. So if you want to call us and it's an American phone number, or we can actually connect into your phone system. So we can basically almost help you to build that infrastructure if you need us to.
Mm-hmm.
But for most people, they already have it. And so what we do is, if you want us to connect into your phone system, we buy an IP phone system over there. You give us your codecs, which is basically the connection, and then we connect right into your phone system. Basically, is we already provide the computer. Obviously, if you have your own email system, Exchange server, we'll connect into that. We've actually, you talked about some of the odd jobs. It's not so much an odd job, but it's more of an odd, I would say, company or person. We actually have one of our graphic designers doing ads for an Amish newspaper in Millersburg, Pennsylvania. And so their ads, not all of them, but they actually have a designer in the US. And then we do a lot of the ads for them, and they use things like Dropbox. There's lots of free tools. There's lots of technology that's already out there. And so if you're not familiar with that and working remotely, we can help you to build those systems if you're open to that. And most of them are free or very low cost, like Slack every month. That's a great tool internally, that we use all the time for screen sharing and otherwise. And there's a whole bunch more. So you don't really, I would say more than anything is have an open mind, but the kind of real benefits and what most people don't understand for a small business owner, and this can be, used for multinationals have been doing this for years. Right. But by taking 1 out of 10 people, so you don't even have to cut head count, but if you just replace 1 out of 10, like maybe somebody quits or, somebody retires and you put somebody else in there, typically what our company is going to save you around 20 to 50% over what you would currently pay for the same type of person. And so for a small business owner who might be earning, let's say $100,000, that could potentially add 10 percentage points to his profitability with one move. That's almost unheard of. And the thing is, we back you up with a 1 month guarantee. If you don't like it for any reason, we'll actually give you all your money back. So have you ever had anybody where you've hired and they give you a 1 month guarantee? It doesn't happen. So that's the kind of stuff we do to kind of back you up. But I think as far as if you're ready, and you're open to it, and you have very clear job description, and we can help you to build that, provided you're willing to go through the process. One of the things, and I don't want to take up too much of the time, but I find that the real benefit to this, and most people don't see it, is when you start to get problems and you're like, how is that a benefit? Well, because it will start to lay bare your process. And
Right.
now you can start to see is, oh, why did that go wrong? And what happens is when somebody's beside you, you kind of tell them, oh, well, this is how you do it. And then they start to do it that way. And then you say, oh, no, not this way. There's an exception to the rule.
Right.
But they never really codify those
Right.
exceptions, and they
Right.
don't build a process. And when you're working remotely, it forces you into that. It's like an ERP system for business. That's why when businesses get to a certain point, they typically say, "Oh, we need an ERP system or enterprise resource planning system," like I'm trying to think like SAP or one of those, Microsoft
Right.
Dynamics, because it helps them to really to get their process down. And that's one of the real benefits to this if you're open to it. But it's a little painful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I go through that all the time. People, on a simple basis, talk about a workflow, and again, that's what you're talking about, to some degree. But I'll be talking about a workflow, and they'll say, "Well, can we integrate your testing into our HIRS system or ATS?" And I say, "Yes." And I go, "Well, when do you want the test delivered? Because it'll all be automated." And they go, "Well, that's a good question. We're still discussing that." Well, you can't do it randomly. So do you want it before the interview, after the interview? Do you want it with the application? Do you want it for all positions? Do you want everyone to get the same test, or do you want different tests? And when somebody is basically making those decisions independently, you check with the hiring managers. Hey, do you want us to test this person? Or, this is a little bit of a different position. Should we look for something else? When you codify that, and nobody's ever had that discussion before, I said, basically, it's going to be standardized. So you're going to integrate this, and everybody is going to get the assessment at the same time, and everybody's going to get the same assessment, unless you tell the technology, you tell the developers that you want it differently. So I understand exactly what you're going through. And again, there's a lot of processes that are just done. Well, as soon as you hear it depends, then it's actually a good strategy to go through that, because if that's something that happens to that person, if that person happens to leave, if you happen to not be there, how do you standardize that? And so I think just going through the process, obviously you want the business, but just I want to allow that to scare anybody off. I think it's a great, it's a good move in the first place.
It is, I don't want to scare anybody off, but I don't want to sugarcoat it either. But it's the same type of thing you're going to get. It's the same type of thing that you're going to get whether you hire somebody. You're just not going to see it in the same way that you might. And so we try to help you to bridge that gap. And that's what I'm here to try to do. We want you to be successful. We really think that this is a great tool for business owners to add to their business in every way possible, and also to add to the value for their employees. I value that, the culture. I value everybody that works for me, and I want to do the same thing. And I value the people in India. I go over there twice a year at least. I'm headed over in a few weeks. I've actually been to their houses. I've been to their weddings. I mean, these are people that I care for, and I want to see do well, and I want to see the people we work with do well. And if you're willing to go through that process, I think it'll make you a better company. And right now, we just hired an accountant out for a pretty large accounting firm in Lancaster, and it's really, I think, added to their team, because they're excited about what this new person can bring. They're excited about the cultural diversity. They bring a different viewpoint into the world. They bring, some different manners. They're typically a little bit more respectful. It's kind of refreshing in many ways. So there's a lot of real benefits, and we're here to kind of support you. And if you want to have a conversation, I'd love to do that. There's no pressure. It's may not be right for you, but if it is, love to help you along that journey.
Yeah, I mean, what I like, really like about your model, before we close here, what I really like about the model is, again, there's lots of sites, as you said, you can go up online and hire a lot of these positions. What I like about you is again that you actually have that workspace, that oversight, but also just what you said is helping people move into this role. Is again, it's not, hey, I just need a body, and you're saying, hey, we can provide that. You want to make sure that it's going to be successful. You understand what some of the challenges are, and you personally have done that. I mean, you personally built this business and have, we learned from your mistakes. You're going to carry us.
I made the mistakes for you, so you don't have to make them for yourself. And so, what is that? The old adage: if you learn from your own mistakes, you'll survive. If you learn from others' mistakes, you'll thrive.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So how can people get in contact with you? What's the best way to be able to do that?
Best way is you can email me at bkeller@lmkindustries.com. That's one way to get in touch with me. Or you can call me at 717-471-7498. That's 717-471-7498. That's my cell number. You'll reach me directly.
Okay, I'll put that in the comments too when we post this, and that'll be up there. So excellent. And I also really like I think your tagline, your hashtag sums it up great. Staff different.
Yeah.
I think that could be very, very broad. Hey, I appreciate it. It's good talking to you. It's been quite a while, but as soon as we connected a few weeks ago, it was like, hey, we gotta pursue this a little bit. And I'm sure you and I will be doing business, but hopefully there'll be a lot of the listeners too. So
hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, have a great day. Thanks.
See ya. Bye.